going to do is I've always been enamored with kind of the orb shape, or globe, or whatever you want to call it. Harvey Sadow was one of the first people that came to my notice that was making really nice orb shapes. And I find this to be a really good canvas for the techniques, the colors, and everything that we're doing. So I'm going to throw one of those shapes.
How much clay are you using?
3?
3, thanks.
I think it's 3 6/18.
When you went from sitting to standing, I just always assumed men have more strength. I would like to do something like that, but I don't think I consider it. Is there, okay, just leaning is it strength?
I don't think it's strength. You use these splash pans to brace on.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't need to.
Okay. In throwing for years, I used to just take a bag of clay and just cut a square chunk off and throw it down on the wheel. And even though you can center the upper section of the clay, the bottom of the clay still has the compression of the pugging in that square shape. And I was making planter shapes, and when I would get to cone 10, and you know the clay at that point is very plastic and almost like putty at that point, it would oval my pots. And I believe that it had to do with the fact that I didn't wedge the clay completely, and I was putting a square piece down and I was wheel wedging. And I believe that if you wedge your clay up very good, get it in as round a shape as you can, get it as close to the center of the wheel as you can, I think you'll have a better chance of not having something like that happen. It also saves an awful lot on your elbows and wrists and stuff, because the clay is almost centered when you put it on the wheel. So one more time, up and down.
Are you using Phoenix right now?
I'm actually using Sold 860. When we make the Sager containers, I use Sold 860 or any other raku body for the Sager containers. I also use Sold 860 when I'm doing just a standard raku. But for everything else, I use Phoenix, or I guess Laguna's got a good clay body, and I wouldn't know what the number is, but
B66.
Pardon?
66.
Okay, 66. B-mix I would use in Sager firing and even Ferric chloride firing, because it's protected inside either foil or a clay Sager container. But I wouldn't use B-mix to do horsehair, because you're pulling the pot out of the kiln. It's going through quartz conversion at around 1100 degrees, and of course horsehair is at 1100 degrees, and so if it's going to crack, it's going to crack doing horsehair. So I've had mixed results with B-mix. So you want a stoneware body that will raku well, but isn't going to be real gritty. So
Charlie, per inch.
yeah, so this is where you would put the pot inside, and so I'd use a Sold 860 to make these containers, because there you put your pot inside, they're put in the raku kiln, they take all the stress and everything.
There's a lid that goes on this too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there
Okay.
a limited number of times you can fire that as a Sager?
It just, you know, it's weird because it depends on the container, on the Sager.
Sometimes you can get 20, 30 firings out of one of them, and sometimes you can get half a firing.
Yeah.
So, Okay, opening up. I don't have a needle tool, so I'll use this. I'm going to go for about 3/8 of an inch on the base. Remember, compress your bottom. And the compression, I will take this rib and on an angle so I don't cut the clay up, I'll drag it on the base here and it'll compress and smooth the base. Just like that. And actually I'd been using a kick wheel and I didn't have many S-cracks in the base, and I switched to a power wheel and I was just really throwing really fast, and I ended up with a lot of cracks in the bottom of the pot, and it was because I guess when I was throwing with a kick wheel, everything was a little slower and a little more sedate, and so that's when I had to start paying attention to compression. Okay, Robin Hopper has a video out on throwing, and he uses what's called a claw move. You have this donut shape down here, you want a cylinder. In beginning throwing, it's not so, once you get the centering and the opening up, then what do you do? And this is a technique that really moves a lot of clay and helps you stand a cylinder up. I do a modified claw. Basically, my hands are like this. This is the inside hand, it's higher than the outside, and I roll up like this and then come up evenly across the rim. This hand up here is compressing the top. So, here we go. And I'm not trying to take as much clay as I can up. I'm trying to leave an even amount of clay. Okay, so at this point, it's much easier to start pulling a pot. Whereas before, you had this bagel on the wheel, a donut on the wheel, and it's hard to get started. I'm going to compress this in a little bit. I want this to be a little narrower. Okay. I was making pottery in a production shop, and this young guy right beside me was throwing half a bag of clay planters all day long. I was throwing quarter bag planters all day long. He was getting $2 a piece. I was getting $1 a piece. I was throwing half the clay. And he would pull, and it was just effortless. And I was over there working my tail off all day long, trying to figure out how come he could make a pot as fast as I could make half the pot. And it was years later. I was on a surfboard out in Florida, and there wasn't much waves, but the swales were coming by. And I'd ride up on the swale, and then it'd set back down, and ride up and set back down. And it was almost like seeing the fingers on the inside of the pot making a swale on the side of the pot moving toward this would be the shore. And I got to thinking about it, and a surfboard rides on the front of the wave. If your hand is a surfboard on a pot, you actually follow the wave, the swale, into the beach. And I got to thinking about it, and I had been getting too close to if this is the pot and this is the swale part in the pot, I was riding too much with inside hand in here. I was riding too much on the top of it. Whereas if you think about the thickness of the pot, if the pot is that thick, you need to be the thickness of the pot below it with this inside hand. So if the pot's 2 inches thick, your hand on the outside needs to be 2 inches below it, or you are pinching and it's way too much effort. So think about that. Now, I'm going to have to, on the inside, take off and start moving up, and the outside is going to stay below and wait for that to develop above it. So here we go. I'm gonna clean this up and get rid of the sponge, even though I throw with a sponge all the time, just so you can see. Okay, so I'm staying on the wheel head, and on the inside I'm pushing out and raising up, raising up. Now I start following behind, and it's a much more effortless pull. Now I'm starting to catch up right here. I'm pretty much even coming across right here because I'm not trying to over pull the clay up here. Anybody can pull the top half of the pot. It's the bottom of the pot where you have to concentrate getting the lead out. So press it down a little bit more. Okay, another thing is, if you want to get the clay out of the bottom of the pot and you have a bunch of clay moving, coming off the base of the pot, you can't get your finger under there. Trim it off. Just get rid of it. Or you're going to have to trim it later. So let me lock this up, straighten up the cylinder. I'm not pulling, I'm just straightening it up for the pull. Okay, here we go. This is a typical pull for me. So I'm staying below, and there's that wave. Now it's in front of me, and I'm going to just follow it up. And right about here, I start relaxing on the inside and just following it up because I don't want to over pull the rim. Okay. Another way to get a lot of the extra clay out of the pot is switch over after a couple pulls by your hands, is switch over to a wooden rib, and it'll really lift a lot of the clay out of the bottom of the pot. So let me slow down. Okay, so watch how this rib changes the position. I'm blocking straight up against it. I relax, push out, the thing starts forming, and I slide in underneath that wave and help lift it with it. I'm not cutting it, I'm just lifting it up off the wheel. Okay, I'm going to start putting shape into this. I'm going to be throwing an orb shape.
How thick is the pot? Is that when you start?
I think I need one more pull. It's probably, right in here it's about 3/8, and it's a little bit thicker down below, so I'm going to try to get some more height out of this one. Well, this is called a shaping pull. The pot's demanding that I go ahead and start putting some shape into it. So as I'm doing this, I'm also adding some of the shape that I want to end up with later on. So I'm starting to blow the form out. Okay, I'll switch over to using a metal rib on the outside. I'm going to slow down again. Another thing that I learned the hard way is you don't make the pot look on the outside like you want the final shape to be on the bottom half of the pot, you make the inside of the pot look like the mirror image of what you want the outside of the pot to look like when you're done trimming. So if you got some extra clay in the bottom of the pot, you want to make sure that the inside of the pot matches what you want. That way you can trim it off later. Where I used to tuck it all in and make the pot on the outside look exactly like I wanted, then how do you trim that extra amount on the inside?
You're still riding your inside hand a little bit above the rib?
Yes. I'm using a sponge, so it does help spread the pressure out over a bigger area. You push the button, get the gas flowing, and then the trigger. And then if you want, you can push the button on top and it will hold it like that. I use masonite bats so that I can torch the pot, so I can expand it out further than gravity would normally allow me with a wet clay. So I stiffen the clay up. A masonite bat will burn, but if you use a plastic bat, it'll bubble. So I'll keep a wet sponge here handy. See, now I can push this further out. It's stiffened up a little bit. Get that little wobble out. The flexible rib is kind of pre-burnishing the pot a little bit for me. Knocking the grog down. Okay, I'm going to move it out even further, so I need to stiffen the upper section up a little bit so it doesn't cave on me. A bit more on it. You guys still awake? This is going to be one of those workshops where everybody gets a nap during the throwing demo. Okay, so I've got this out kind of how I want it, so I'm going to start coaxing this inwards. And I'm just using, just like this, I'm just using the tip of my little finger, and I'm just supporting it underneath with my hands, and I'm just going to move it in and gently This is nice and damp. This kidney-shaped rib wood is really nice for bringing the shape in. Also, I use it quite a bit, like on bottlenecks, or in this case, just getting this smoothed out and eased inward.
Charlie, since you have their attention, can I ask, can I make an announcement? Or is it a bad time?
No, not at all.
Okay. Tomorrow, there will be pots for sale of theirs, not only the pieces up here, and you're welcome to come and look at them. Be very careful, if you have diamond rings on, make sure the diamond doesn't clink against it, because it will hurt the pot and the finish. But it's gonna be a lottery tomorrow afternoon, Chris is gonna run it. And not only are these pots gonna be for sale,
Okay, so what we're gonna do is let this stiffen up and we'll come back to it. Let's go do something else. This is when that wooden rib works really good also. Wooden ribs, I find, you know, you get them damp and then they don't have as much surface tension as a metal or a rubber rib. So they don't drag on the pot and torque the pot as much as some of the other types of ribs. And when I'm using the metal rib, I will flex it to the shape of the pot. So I'll bend it. And if you want to have a line to tape to, it's nice to have a little bit of a shoulder raised up right here so your tape has something to hang on to.
pushing that.
I'm pushing it up into the edge of this.
Top part up.
Yeah, I'm pushing the top part up into the rib, and that gives me something where I can apply that blue tape to. Then the last thing I want to do is make sure I go underneath and have a place where the wire can go through underneath without cutting up into the bottom of the pot. Like that. Okay. Lunchtime.